So let's roll some of these clips from Brexit the movie. Here's Kafka's EU. Let's go to the clip.
Exactly how the functions of the British Constitution work, but they get the gist of it. Once every 5 years, we go down the school hall or to a church, we put a cross in a ballot paper, they're all counted up, and the chap with the most votes wins. We get that. You try working out how a European Commissioner is appointed. It's positively Kafkaesque. You can't actually get your head around who does what, why, and who is answerable to whom.
The European Union, which imposes laws on 28 countries, is made up of 7 main institutions, which include the European Council, the Council of the European Union, the Court of Justice of the European Union, the European Commission, and the European Parliament.
Do you know the difference between the European Council, the Council of the European Union, and the Council of Europe?
It's a very good question.
Tell
me how many presidents there are in the European Union.
How many presidents?
Yeah.
I'd guess at 1.
There's 2 presidents, for goodness sake. I don't know what the difference between the 2 presidents is. There's 4 presidents, you say.
There are squads of committees and presidents of this and commissioners of that.
The expression I really hate is pooled sovereignty. It's bollocks. The people of Slovenia have no more idea than the people of the UK and the people of Sweden or the people of Spain what in fact is going on.
I wouldn't profess to understand the detail of how it all works. And I think part of that is deliberate.
One side knows. One side is a priesthood and knows how it all works. And the rest of us, ordinary citizens, don't know how it works. A massive transfer of power takes place.
It was devised to make sure that the great mass of the people could not control government ever again.
So this is a bureaucracy where we don't even have the power to remove the people who govern us. If that's not pure tyranny, then I don't know what is. Why would we want to hand power for the future of our country over to people who are not accountable to anyone? They're not responsible for their own decisions. What kind of terrible idea is that? Moving on to the economy, because there's another clip in this movie where they basically visit some of the fishing ports in northern England to illustrate the fact that the EU has completely decimated the British fishing industry. Fishermen are not allowed to fish right on their own doorstep because, of course, we handed over fishing rights to the EU, who carved it all up and gave rights to countries like the Netherlands, Norway, to fish 3 miles offshore, in some cases, from British territory. So these fish markets, whereas in the past you would have, 12,000 boxes full, teeming of fish laid out in these markets a day, every single day, now it's 200. And they illustrate that in the movie. Again, it put a lot of companies out of business. It put a lot of fishermen out of business. And now we have to import fish from other countries because we're not allowed to fish in our own waters. And in fact, the EU pays fishermen to destroy their own boats. And of course, when it comes down to the consumer level, we have to pay more because we're not allowed to catch our own food. Let's go to this next clip, which is about the economy. This is crony capitalism and the EU. Here's the clip.
Big established firms don't mind regulation so much. For a start, it means less competition.
Big corporate interests tend to love the EU. It suits their purposes perfectly.
All the corporations love the European Union because what it does, it creates the regulations which destroy their smaller rivals.
Big business loves regulation. Don't forget that.
Big companies can lobby in Brussels, and the amount of money they spend there is staggeringly large.
One of the first things that stuns you are the number of invitations on your desk to lunch, breakfast, dinner, champagne receptions, and invariably they come from lobby groups.
There are people who make their entire livelihoods out of being professional lobbyists in Brussels.
This is where a lot of the lobbying goes on. So you will see the lobbyists from different companies, from NGOs.
The returns they get by stifling competition and framing regulations in a way which suits them and keeps other people out is very, very striking.
It used to be called a rich man's club, and that is by and large what it is.
So again, these big businesses love the regulations that the EU imposes because they can afford to put them in place without the bottom line taking too much of a hit. if you're a small or medium-sized business, you can't afford to do that. That's why big corporations love these regulations, because they can use them to strangle their competition. You know, despite the fact that only 6% of their exports, 6% of their exports go to the EU, small businesses have to comply with 100% of the regulations handed down by the EU. Of course, big corporations can afford to hire people to do that behind the scenes. Small businesses can't, so they end up just either giving up entirely or not exporting to the EU. And of course, then they get beat in terms of competition. That's why big business loves the EU. So in what way does that represent small businesses? In what way does that represent the interests of the middle class? It doesn't. Now here's the next clip, which gets into the regulations that the EU imposes. They've actually delayed banning, quote, high-powered kettles, toasters, hairdryers and vacuum cleaners until after this vote takes place, because they know if they did that beforehand, it would stoke the anger of the British people, because it illustrates what level of micromanagement and control that we are being forced to labour under by remaining in the EU. So here's the next clip, regulated people. Let's roll it.
You've got thousands and thousands of bureaucrats, civil servants and administrators, and their job is to push paper, write on paper, have rules on paper, pile up more and more paper. You just get a mass of growing telephone directory size rules and regulations, one after the other, ceaselessly, endlessly. That is actually what the bureaucracy sees itself as there to do.
If the list of EU rules could be put into one document today, it would take more than 2 men to carry it on. Such a document would reach as high as Nelson's column. Regulation is so vast and complex, even the EU is unable to tell us how many laws there are covering different areas of our lives. So we've used some helpful EU databases to make the best estimate we can. Here is regulated EU man waking from his regulated slumber to start his regulated day. You wouldn't think you'd need a law for pillowcases, but the EU has 5. But that's nothing. The pillow inside is subject to 109 different EU laws. As far as we can tell, there are only 11 EU laws pertaining to radio alarm clocks. There's around 400 governing the other stuff on Joe Citizen's bedside table. You can't be too careful with duvets and sheets, so there's around 50 laws governing those. There are 65 laws governing bathrooms, but that doesn't include the contents. How they've managed to think up 31 laws for toothbrushes is beyond me. But let's face it, toothpaste is a bit weird, so 47 laws sounds about right. Mirrors have been known to crack and get dirty, so they're covered by 172 laws. As for the shower, well, we've all seen Psycho. Murdering girls like that is now strictly prohibited. Shampoo can get in your eyes and cause discomfort, 118 laws. EU bureaucrats seem terrified by towels for some reason, slightly more relaxed about radiators. There are 1,246 laws relating to bread, but just 52 covering the crazy anarchic toaster. Just 84 laws cover fridges, but an impressive 12,000 laws cover milk. After all, it might go off. Bowl, 99 laws. Spoon, more than 200 laws, same for the orange juice. But the coffee, whoa, stand back, Grandma. This toxic jungle juice can keep you up all night. The best dog in Britain is unaware of the odourless fog of canine legislation, but careful Ruby, ignorance is no excuse. Our regulated man leaves his regulated house. There are only 92 laws about pavements, after all they're just pavements, but you get the idea. EU regulation surrounds us like invisible barbed wire. When we're frustrated in our daily lives by needless, stupid EU laws, it's infuriating. But it's much worse than infuriating if you're thinking of starting a new business. It's like entering a legal minefield.
For small and medium-sized businesses and startups, it's perilous. Complying with regulation imposes huge costs, and falling foul of regulation can put you out of business.
So again, it's crony capitalism, it's corporatism, it's the bureaucracy working hand in hand with big business to strangle out small business, because they don't have the means, they don't have the time, they don't have the staff to comply with these hundreds and hundreds for each individual thing. Towels, you saw there, like 200 different regulations for towels, 600 for coffee. They just don't have the time or means to comply with these regulations. So they either go out of business or they just have to constrict their trade to within the UK. They can't even trade with the EU. So what is in it for them? And what is in it for us as consumers? And of course, what this has created is this anemic economic growth which pervades the EU, which in turn has led to mass uprisings and civil unrest because people's quality of living is going down. The cost of living is going up. And now we see, you know, right-wing extremist parties springing up and saying that they have the solution, they have the answer. So it's fueling extremism on both sides. We've had mass riots in Europe for the past 6-7 years. So how is it in our interests? How does it make us safe to stay in the EU when these anemic economic policies are going to create more riots, more civil unrest? That's not safety. The Vote Remain campaign claims that we're only going to maintain our safety and avoid World War III if we stay in this bureaucratic mess. Again, it's complete BS. Let's go to the final clip, which sums up why Britain needs to leave the EU. Here's the clip.
In the referendum, we will be asked to choose. Do we want to be governed by an organisation which we don't understand, run by people we don't know and haven't elected, who have the power to impose on us laws that we haven't debated and have little or no chance of blocking or repealing?
Have you decided what you're... We need to regain the right for British people to make British laws.
If people believe that the best way to strengthen the United Kingdom is to hand over every year more money and more power to an unaccountable bureaucratic elite in Brussels, then what they should do is campaign to stay in the European Union.
It comes down to the essential issue: the working man and woman of this country against people who think we have a better plan and a better mind than you. And if you don't like it, what are you going to do? And the answer is, we're going to vote leave. So
there are a number of issues where I believe that we should be leaving.
This is people versus the establishment, people versus the elite. I just hope that the mass of people who may not go around being interviewed much, may never get a look in on any of the media or television, come June the 23rd, will be out there saying this is our chance to get our own back.
Give us back control of our own country.
With general elections, it doesn't really matter who you vote for, Conservative or Labour, because you know that in 4 years' time, you can change your mind. This time you can't change your mind. This time is for keeps.
This referendum is the most important political act that has happened in my lifetime. This is about our future, our freedom, our democracy, our right to govern ourselves.
What really matters is that you should have the power to remove the people who govern you. The reason why the suffragettes went to all that trouble to get the vote was because they wanted to, they themselves, be treated as grown-ups and decide their own destiny.
If I was told I would be stewing grass to feed my family in 5 years' time if we left the European Union, I would still do it.
It's time to regain our freedom and independence, the right to decide ourselves how we live our lives.
There's a lot at stake here. What we want is democracy. We, the people, should determine our own destiny. We have the capacity to shape our own futures. So my question is, what price freedom?
That's BREXIT the movie, which came out here last week, and it's free on YouTube, it's free on Vimeo. I posted it on my Twitter page yesterday. So, of course, most of the listeners here are American. They're not going to vote in the EU referendum. I'm well aware of that. But you can reach many people. I think it's up to about 250,000 views on YouTube at this point, which, quite frankly, is not enough. We need to get millions and millions of views for that video because people in the United Kingdom are out there. They're looking for answers. They're not getting accurate, unbiased sources of information. And, of course, that's vehemently pro-leave. But, again, they cite facts, statistics, history, and logic. They don't pander to irrational fear and emotion like the Remain campaign does by threatening World War III if Britain leaves the EU.